Something that Sonia launched her leadership campaign really emphasizing was inclusion, diversity, outreach to people whose voices aren't represented or aren't present in the BC Greens as we are right now. Starting with a video from Lisa, and it's video number 3. What leadership qualities are essential for engaging diverse voices inside and outside of our party?
I am just going to give you a list because that's the easiest way to do it. You have to have patience. You have to be willing to listen to all these different types of voices. I think you have to be sympathetic versus empathetic. In empathy, we tend to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And when you're talking about diverse voices, you can't do that. Trying to pretend like you would know what it would be like to be whatever doesn't work well, but we can sympathize. And so I think having somebody who's sympathetic is important. We need to have somebody who's a collaborator, an excellent communicator. That's very important. Somebody who is authentic and a hell of an advocate. And I think the authenticity, especially when you're trying to engage diverse voices, people can tell, like when you're just doing it to be performative versus being real. And I also believe it's so important to be loving, and people can feel that energy as well. Um, yeah, those would be the qualities.
Sure, I'll start. I I think being really authentic and taking, as was mentioned, taking the time, being patient, and really creating that space so that you can actually engage and you can really understand the particular issue or perspective. And what we so often do, and we all try not to do it, is to bring our lens into that conversation, as opposed to letting the conversation or the dialogue actually be focused around a space that whoever you're meeting with is comfortable with. And you know, we've seen a lot of that recently, where folks that are on the other side of the political spectrum or have a different viewpoint have a real incapacity to actually engage in a way that makes the person you're working with or meeting with comfortable, and you lose the understanding, you lose the connection, you lose the ability to advocate without having creating that type of environment. So to me, for a leader to be successful, they have to really be able to create that space, whether it's one-on-one or in a group setting. And I've seen it work, we all have, and that's going to be a critical attribute.
I think for me at least, it's really, I love these conversations because we all seem to come together around almost a consensus in many ways. And something, Rob, that you said that really stuck out for me, similar in many ways to Lisa, is creating space and then being there for the other person. So, you know, we are here this weekend to talk about policy. That's kind of the cornerstone of this weekend. This is what we believe. This is how we see the world. And that's really important. We need to know how we see things. But what we're talking about here is from that place, stepping into someone else's space and having conversations with them there as well.
I think it's also important to be intentional. Sometimes it's just too easy to say it's a good idea, but then when you say, what are you doing about the good idea? And I'll just use one example in New Brunswick. It was our intention to have gender balance within our candidates. That was the stated intention. The Liberal Party, led by a woman who would become the first female to be Premier of the province, one would think that might have been their intention as well. They didn't come close. They didn't come close. We did. And it was hard. And it meant at times going out of our way, as you said, to go into somebody's space, to make it possible for someone to step forward, to maybe not have a candidate in place as quickly. But it was our intention, and we were not going to miss out on that goal if we could do it. And it taught me a lesson about intentionality. So if your intention is to be inclusive and to be equitable and to be diverse, you have to ask yourself, who's not at the table? And how do we go find that person or find that community, and what will they tell us about why they're not at the table? That's a long process.
Just one thing is around, I think letting go of the idea that as a leader you have all the answers, and really embracing the idea that as a leader you're kind of a vessel, right? You are, and I really found my 4 years, I was in this continuous state of learning nonstop. There was just so much, and to really approach the work and people, not thinking I'm going to go in with the answers. I'm going in with the questions.
I'm just going to say one thing and maybe go out on a bit of a limb, but I'm going to say heart-centered, just because I think that we see a lot of politicians that are it's very mechanistic. It's all about the numbers. You know, they're shaking your hand and their eyes are already moving to the next person who they have to shake hands with. And I think, you know, unfortunately, well, I guess, you know, it worked out in the end, but I really ignored the maximum 2 minutes, and I suspect, knowing Rob, I suspect he did too. And that's because if you're truly heart-centered, you can't walk away from somebody who's telling you their story after 2 minutes. You can't cut those short. Yes, I mean, you can't spend forever. It doesn't work. But if it's all numerical to you, then I think that's so deep. I mean, deep canvassing is easier to do between elections, and it's also harder to organize. But I think you need to bring some aspect of that to, and that spreads. People know they've been listened to appropriately on a heart-centered level, and they tell people, and I think that's worth more than hitting as many doors as possible in an hour. So, not entirely related to the question, but I wanted to get it off my chest. So.
And I think walking in somebody's shoes, something Lisa kind of was, Kevin Arsenault, who did lose his seat by a few hundred votes in New Brunswick, but he also had appendicitis and was out for 2 weeks in a 4-week campaign. That's my comeback about that. Can you imagine finding out your appendix burst while you're knocking on people's doors? And he was recruiting volunteers in the hospital. He's an amazing person. But one thing I learned from Kevin is, don't talk about somebody if you haven't gone out to experience who they are. And I had a disagreement with Kevin at one point. He wanted to spend a day out on a fishing boat. And I said, well, you don't have time to be on a fishing boat for 8 hours because you need to be knocking on doors. And he goes, Joanne, at that point, 30% of my constituents are fishermen. And I'm not. I'm a farmer. He was a great farmer. So he spent the day out hauling lobster traps. And you know what? He won, I'm sure, every vote on that boat, but he won all of their friends because he had gone out and lived with them, didn't just talk about them. And when he was in a debate and he was talking about issues with the fisheries, at least he had some credibility. And then the next thing he wanted to do for a whole day was he wanted to go off and serve meals in a nursing home. And I thought, oh, great, that's all I need is you stuck in the kitchen, not out talking to people. But my point is, Kevin knew his riding. He knew where he would meet people, and he knew he could then have some sympathy that we're hearing about. And when he won his riding the first time, which he was a long shot, everyone said he wouldn't, I think that's why he did it. It's why the Liberals then redrew the riding to put more Liberals in the riding so he could not win it the second time.
A word that is coming to mind for me, listening to everyone, is the word presence. Where is the leader present? Who is the leader present to? And moving to another question, again, starting with Lisa, and it's video number 5. What challenges do we as a party, but specifically the new leader of the party, need to be present to in the next 4 years?
There are a lot of challenges that we're going to be looking at in the next 4 years. Probably the two that come up most in mind is one, needing to increase the diversity within our party. As British Columbia and in fact Canada becomes more and more diverse in many ways, we need a party that truly is reflective of Canadians, where people can see themselves in the party. And so that's going to really require us and having a leader that can hopefully either have connections and make connections to various groups that aren't part of our group right now. I think that's imperative. The second thing is the rise of conservatism. And with the rise of conservatism, we really need to think about why that's so appealing, especially to certain demographics like young men. And I think part of it is when people feel disaffected, they feel like people haven't been listening to them, they don't have a space to be, then there's a void. And whoever comes into that void with ideas and is able to present solutions, that seems to be the space where people are going. So I think we need to be clear and better at explaining where we're coming from, connecting it to people's daily lives, so they can see how being with us in our party literally is going to have an impact on them and their lives, and not be apologetic for who we are, making sure that we're doing it in a way that doesn't come off as patronizing or anything like that, but comes off as, no, we really have real solutions that really can improve your life. And if you join us, then things can change and provide some hope.
The rise of right wing, rise of extremism. I think that where the party's at right now is that COVID happened and it really crippled us, and I think our network across the province. And we need to be building in field, and that's where we win. That's how we win. I think it's always been how we win, and we need to build that network and build it strong. And there's a lot of discussion on social media and how to use it, and that's a floating question in my mind. But I think that to build that network and that connectedness person to person, because I think so much has been lost socially and for the party, and we need that network, and it needs to be a lot stronger. I think that's a challenge. I think it's a challenge far beyond our party, but also specific to our party.
There's, I think, again, field is where we have those one-on-one conversations. It's where we meet people at the door and hear from them. Sonia and Molly and I were actually at a panel discussion on the poly crisis a couple of weeks ago, and one of the anecdotes, not an anecdote, the panelists were asked, what can we do to move our society forward and out of the poly crisis? And of course, the extremism, the conservatism is a big part of that. And one of the panelists said, you need to borrow a cup of sugar. You need to, when you run out of something, you need to go and meet your neighbor. You need to talk to them face to face. Ask them for a cup of sugar. Maybe they are someone that you wouldn't really talk to in any other circumstance in your life, but it is so important to put a face and a history and a perspective to that And so I'm going to pass it off to Sonia just because she was at that panel. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that specifically, but yeah, I'll leave it with you.
Well, those of you who know me well won't be surprised to hear that I have a chart for that. Back in 2019, actually, I was, and this will relate to the challenge, and I think the challenge to the Greens is always existential. Like, for now, it's always existential. That's the reality. We are a small party, and the other parties would love for us not to exist. The story that we need to tell is Greens, add Greens, get better outcomes, and we can prove that. We can show that. Between 2017 and 2020, we got better outcomes for this province. The work that Adam and I did, and now the agreement that we have in place in the current situation, we get better outcomes when there are Greens in the legislature, and we can't let that story not be told. But the community, the Cup of Sugar story, in 2019, driving around the province in the summer, which we always did to go to these communities and meet with people and get to know the province as best we could, we had to flee a forest fire at one point and had to go from the middle of the province all the way out to Valemount and then back through the Kootenays to get to the west coast. And I got home, I thought, wow, we are really in quite the long emergency. And so I thought, in emergencies, we see the best in people oftentimes, right? So the cup of sugar analogy extends to when there's something that happens in a neighborhood or there's an emergency, people, it's like that desire for our best angels to show up, our best humanity to show up, comes out, and we all want to help in an emergency. And so how do we translate that wonderful aspect of our humanity into something in a long emergency, which is much harder? And I came up with this idea of neighborhood captains. And it's not just me, I've seen other iterations of this, but the idea that you have people in every neighborhood, say for every 10 or 20 households, and they're the captain of those households, and they make sure that everybody's connected, you know your phone numbers, you've got some plans in place if there's a fire or a natural disaster or an emergency of some kind, you know who's looking out for each other. And out of this, you start to build this strengthened social fabric. And I really think I'm never going to give up on the neighborhood captain's plan, because it is what we need in this world more and more.
Well, Peter McLeod, who we've had to speak to the BC Greens, wrote a piece in the Tyee. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend you look it up. Peter McLeod, Tyee, and he wrote about what he's calling the civil defense groups. And he says we are now in, he's using what's happening south of the border as one of the reasons, but climate change, fires, pandemics, we need to start organizing civil defense groups. And it's exactly what you're saying. And I mean, anyone who's lived through a wartime will recognize them. But it's George Monbiot talks about organizing the commons. This is part of Green DNA. And I think it is something that we can very much see as our way of organizing. So you start with something that is civil and for civil society, but that can be translated into green roots. One quick thing that we don't have, and I think we need more of, and it comes back to what Sonia said. Yes, we need a leader who can fill many of those roles. Maybe it shouldn't be one person. We should talk about that. But the other thing we need are surrogates. And Greens don't have enough surrogates. We don't have our pundits. We don't have our think tanks. All the other parties do. And they're kicking our ass in the public realm, because whenever the media wants to talk to somebody, they don't want an official Green. They want a Green surrogate. And we just don't have the depth. And a great loss to us was Adam, who was very good at this and the media liked and whatnot. But it shows that our bench strength is not there. So one of the things I think you can do for the new leader is to make sure they're not going out there alone, so that they need someone to knock down a bad rumor. There's a person who writes op-eds over there. We're going to get them out. If the leader's facing a challenge, you've got 2 or 3 people can go on a panel or can show up. And that, I know we're small in numbers, but this is, I think, something where it's a weakness that we can turn into a strength by getting pundits.
Yeah.
Sing it, sister.
I think again, this goes back to like having the leaders back in a lot of ways, being that support. And I actually just want to give a quick shout out to Arzina Hamir, who was a candidate for Courtney Comox in this election, and who has been doing a fantastic job on CBC Radio in Vancouver on the political panel Monday mornings on the coast. And we are over time. I do want to finish with one more question. We'll need to keep the answers or remarks brief. But I think this is, in order to move forward, to find the new leader, to find many contestants who are going to create an incredibly lively and exciting leadership contest, something that we need to be vocal about and talk about is what's in it for the leader. It's certainly not money. It's certainly not time with your family and friends. But there is something, probably more than one thing, incredibly valuable for the right person who wants to put their name forward. So, Alex, we have one last video from Lisa on what opportunities does this role offer someone who might be thinking about putting their name forward, and that's video 6.
What can somebody get out of a role, being a political leader? A lot. First and foremost, and I think most importantly, is you have the opportunity to help shape and impact the lives of British Columbians, and that is huge. That is a huge responsibility, and it's also a huge opportunity to be able to engage in that way. A lot of people think politics doesn't impact their life, and it absolutely impacts every single aspect of your life, from whether you're putting on a seatbelt to the kind of curriculum that children are learning in school to what taxes you pay, no matter what level of government it is. And so I think it's really imperative that we have somebody who understands that. For the person who is a leader, it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to connect with other people, to grow skills around listening, to grow skills around collaborating, and to engage in a way that normally people don't have that opportunity to engage. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for someone.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo what Lisa said. I've been, I don't know if any of you saw, my 11-year-old daughters were in here before, and they didn't stay very long because policy conventions are not that interesting to 11-year-olds. And I've been pretty clear that one of the reasons it's not in the cards for me right now is just the travel and what Sonia described. There's a whole lot of relationship building and network building across the province and the travel. But I think in terms of, if you were just looking at the jobs that are available in this province, and if you cast aside, maybe the financial reward, although there is one, it's not a volunteer role, but it is one of the most unique and interesting jobs available in this province to take on this role, and for somebody who has the time and energy and communication skills and all the other things, it's an absolutely perfect opportunity to shape politics in BC, and I think we're obviously all hoping that's a big draw, and I think it will be. There's challenges to it, but it is very unique and doesn't come along very often. So I think there's a selling feature there.
It's the most amazing opportunity, and what it will do is it enables you to follow your values and actually get things done in a way that reflects the values we Greens have, whether it's reconciliation, whether it's taking care of the most vulnerable amongst us, whether it's actually getting real progress on the fight for climate change, or most importantly, whether it's the opportunity to actually work with that demographic that's disaffected and show them how things can actually change and give them hope, but not only hope, give them results. And that opportunity is like one of a kind, once in a generation, because in the next 5 or 6 years, this perfect storm gives us a huge opportunity to actually change the dial in a positive way, you know, and so for the person who's up for this is going to be like the most amazing opportunity, and you know, for the right person, it's just going to be wonderful. So my view is, holy smokes, you should all apply.
All the things that everybody said. But and a lot of you will have heard me say this before. And people used to ask me, you know, how do you keep going? You're always going. And it was purpose and joy. And having purpose, and I never felt that there was a day in my time as leader, in my time as MLA, in my time as an elected regional director, I never felt that there was a day when I did not have purpose. And that purpose was ever-changing, and it came in the form of a conversation or learning about something new, but that purpose was fuel. And then the joy came from being able to have agency, to be able to act on things that I cared about so much and that I could see was making a difference in people's lives, was making a difference in the shape of the province. I mean, it is an extraordinary opportunity, and I feel so fortunate to have had it. And I also know, like we called for term limits, the BC Greens. Leadership isn't a place that you should aspire to get to and then stay there. You know, it's an active position. It's not a location, it's a role. And for me, it was the right time to recognize, okay, you know, the next person with the energy that I had going into this is going to come along, and they're going to have the benefit that this party hasn't had before, which is the benefit of some elders, you know, the benefit of people who are still deeply committed to the success of the party and to the next person who's in a leadership role. But I'll just come back to purpose and joy, and I had an enormous amount of both of those things.
Yeah. I think if you feel political leadership is a calling, and I know that kind of gets overused, but if you do not feel called to this, then this is not a task for you. But if you feel you have something to say and you are being called to use this role, because it is a role, it's not a lifetime career, to say something, then you should seriously consider it. Because, as we've heard, and I agree with everyone, it is an opportunity. It's also a chance to inspire the next generation, to say to our kids, when they get a little older, to say to our kids, democracy matters. I was willing to step forward and do this because I believe in your future. I can't think of a whole lot of things you can do that allow you to say that. And I think that's important. I think we're losing sight of some of that. Service to your community, service to the planet, service to your fellow citizens, that's a calling, and it's an important one. And we have to be careful. We don't give up the space to the people who do not care enough to treat it with respect. So I really think it comes back to your values and your heart-centeredness, but you've got to feel that you get up every morning with purpose and that you can find joy in fulfilling your calling.
I love that. And I think I had the privilege of seeing Sonia, and after you signed the accord, it was peace. And I think it's such an incredible opportunity, the opportunity of a lifetime to shape the lives of British Columbians for generations. I think all the time about community health centers and getting that across the province. That's amazing, and that will save lives. And I know that you know that, and you are so happy. And I think that the joy and just that sense of deep purpose, it's the opportunity of a lifetime. I think that this party is small, but our impact is deep. And I'm excited to see. Comes next.
So tomorrow at our AGM, we will hear a little bit about the leadership contest itself and how that's going to work. But I think we're all leaving here with a couple of jobs. The first is just to go out there and have conversations, to meet people where they're at, to learn, to listen. And the second thing is, I am absolutely certain that most of us, if not all of us, know people in our lives, if that isn't yourself, in fact, that might make a great leader of this party. And to go out and to have conversations with them, invite them to consider this. There are a couple of ways you can do that. Of course, having that initial conversation is something you can do first. You can ask them to reach out to the party if there's some interest. You'll get this information tomorrow, but leadership.contest@bcgreens.ca. You can also reach out to us if you think it's more appropriate for us to reach out to them and have that conversation. And finally, if you have more thoughts, because I hope I haven't talked too much, because I have so many thoughts and ideas coming from hearing these incredible leaders speak. You probably do too. Send them to us, info@bcgreens.ca. Our incredible, I don't know what your title is, Sega, anymore, because I think it just changed, but is the main person who receives those emails, and those will get forwarded on to the Leadership Contest Committee as well, because those are very helpful for shaping the conversation we want to have. That is the leadership contest itself. So I do have a couple of housekeeping things to go over, but before I do that, I just want to express my sincere gratitude to the five of you, Joanne, Sonia, Jeremy, Rob, Molly, and to Beatrice and Lisa for sharing your wisdom, your experience, your hopes, your ideas for what the future holds for us and how we can shape that. So thank you so much to all of you for being that.